All in the family. Let's play hardball. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Let me start tonight with this, where the wild things are. If you're wondering where the wild things are, where the real right wing of the country finds its home these days, look no further than the home of Rafael Edward Cruz. What do we make of Cruz Sr.'s charge that the president should go back to Kenya? Should we kiss it off as another crazy Texas birther comment, of whom there are so many and we hear so much? Should we ignore the words of Cruz Sr. that the president of this country is a Marxist, that he's a second Fidel Castro? Again, what are we to make of these charges by the man who serves as surrogate for his Texas senator son? Is the father the end of this thinking? Does it all stop with him? Or is the surrogate closer to the senator, the father closer to the son than either will let us know? Does it matter? Or should we ignore the words of this man who is so close to the country's loudest, angriest voice of the far right? MSNBC political analyst David Corn is Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones Magazine, and he broke today's story on Rafael Cruz Sr. And Wayne Slater is with the Dallas Morning News. Back in September, by the way, of last year, Rafael Cruz spoke to a Tea Party group on behalf of his son, who was running for the Senate at the time. He made the statement, the claim, if you will, about the President of the United States. This one, let's watch him.
We have our work cut out for us. We need to send Barack Obama back to Chicago. I'd like to send him back to Kenya,
back to Kenya, back to Indonesia. According to the senior Cruz, President Obama is an outright Marxist. Let's watch this.
We have to unmask this man. This is a man that seeks to destroy all concept of God. And I'll tell you what. This is classical Marxist philosophy. Right. Karl Marx very clearly said it. Marxism requires that we destroy God because government must become God.
Well, the Senator Cruz's office told Mother Jones, quote, Pastor Cruz does not speak for the senator. But in fact, he often does, as a surrogate put out by his son. Rafael Cruz is more than just a senator's father. As the Conservative National Review put it, Ted Cruz has used him as a confidant, a stand-in, as I said, and a special envoy. He has, quote, sway in his son's inner circle that makes him a power broker. His son trusts his father's political instincts. He uses his father for the kind of guidance you'd expect from a consultant. As Ted Cruz himself boasted to the magazine, quote, my dad poured himself into my Senate race last year in the early months. We didn't have much of a campaign. One day, I couldn't make an event, so he drove out to West Texas alone. No staffers, nothing. And he spoke on my behalf. A few hours later, I called him and asked how it went. He said, even surrogates for the other candidates were asking for Cruz yard signs. Well, that's great father-son stuff. I'm all for that. I was lucky to have a father somewhat like that in terms of faithfulness to me and me to him. But let's go to David Corn. Sir, this is about a political partnership. This is about Bobby and Jack Kennedy, rather than Jack and Joseph Kennedy. Yeah. This is about two guys out there selling it.
Rafael Cruz represents in a lot of ways the far right of the Tea Party, libertarian economics, and also the far right of Christian fundamentalism. And throughout the piece that we put up on the side of Mother Jones today, we quote him with videos of saying some very, very extreme things, both religiously and just in terms of politics. When he gets out there and says President Barack Obama wants to destroy all concept of God, that he believes also that that government is God. These are very harsh things to say. Now, he's saying this while campaigning for his son as a representative of his son. So I think it's a fair question to put to Senator Ted Cruz. Do you buy this? Is this man really speaking for you? Does this somehow shape, animate, and influence your views as you become the leader of the Tea Party and the far right here? And, it's a question that he hasn't answered. And today, or yesterday, he told me that all these remarks were taken out, or his office told me, these remarks were taken out of context.
Back to Kenya.
I mean, I don't know how you take those remarks out of context, because we put up the whole videos, as you just saw.
Well, I think context is the right question to use here. Wayne Slater, this question. If this guy gets any further in terms of power on the right wing, we're talking about Senator Cruz, if he gets any higher, he's getting pretty high right now. He may be one of the 2 top right-wingers in the country, along with Rand Paul. People will say, how come we didn't know this about his father? So I think people ought to know about it. They'll say, well, it's not fair to talk about a family member. I think he's more than a family member based upon what I've been seeing here. He's out there in the political arena himself. He wasn't dragged into the arena like some family members are. He wasn't simply an embarrassing relative like Donald Nixon or Sam Houston Johnson or Billy Carter. He went into the political arena. He chose to have us listen to him. And now we are. Your thoughts, Wayne. Who is he and what role does he play?
Well, David's got it exactly right. Look, I've spent some time with Rafael Cruz on the road with Ted Cruz. He is very, very, very close to his son in every way that you can think, both ideologically and obviously as a strong father supporting his son. The father, when Ted was in high school in Houston, was instrumental in making sure that Ted went to after-school classes that taught basically Bircher philosophy, sort of Australian economics, Bircher philosophy by a guy named Closen, and a number of other people. And so Rafael Cruz has always held these views. He is very influential with respect to the son. Now, look, you ask the son the question, do you buy this stuff? And the son easily, as politicians often say about a spouse or a relative, look, he doesn't speak directly for me on these issues. What's most important about Rafael Cruz is that he speaks directly in a way that resonates to the constituencies that Ted Cruz wants to hear. Yeah. Rafael Cruz has said these kinds of things in Tea Party groups here. I've heard him in Iowa and elsewhere. And let me tell you, you go away and talk to some of these pastors, religious pastors, and populist Tea Party folks on the right, and they'll say, what's to disagree with?
This is exactly what Boehner does in the House. It's exactly what all people on the right now do. They have this rightist, far right of right cotillion out there, this auxiliary out there. They use it to get right. So they get the entire right wing. And if they get into power, that will be part of their coalition, right? And they do it by always saying, well, I'm not that far right, but that guy's an ally of mine. And I'm going to mess with them. Boehner says it. All these politicians say it now. They won't disown the craziest of them because the craziest of them is their engine.
Well, yeah, it's the tiger they want to ride into power. It's the tiger that John Boehner rode into power as Speaker. It's the tiger that I think Ted Cruz wants to ride into power, at least in the Iowa
and those people
primaries.
Jumping up and down and kicking their heels or clicking their heels for Ted Cruz, the junior, are thinking, many of them, like the father. But they know you can't say that in public.
And
like Kenya.
And Wayne talked about Rafael Cruz's standing within the Tea Party, which is very strong. He's also been featured by the Heritage Action Group and Freedom Works. He's becoming a right-wing star of his own. But also his sway is increasingly and very strong within the evangelical community, Christian Reconstructionists, the Dominionists. We probably don't have time to go into all their theology here, but it's very, very interesting. How do these? These people are. Yeah, we can get into.
What does it mean, Dominionist? What's it mean to be
a Dominionist? Basically, has a view of the world which is very, very rigid and fundamental. That people can be kings and priests. A king is someone who works in the secular world. A priest is someone who works in the spiritual world, who are anointed by the church, and they take dominion over every aspect of society, economics, politics, education, and so on. And so they anoint people. Ted Cruz himself has been anointed by Dominionist pastors, and it's them basically saying...
So this is a Christian version of Sharia.
Well, it's not a set of laws, but it's basically saying these are the people who are going to bring into power the kingdom of Christ. And they basically talk about a theocracy without calling it such.
Wayne, watch this and tell us what it means. In another Tea Party rally this spring, Rafael Cruz, that's the senior Cruz, called the United States a Christian nation. Let's watch and see.
I submit to you that these 2 documents were signed on the knees of the framers. These 2 documents are divine revelation from God. And yet our president has the gall to tell us that this is not a Christian nation. This was formed, the United States of America was formed to honor the Word of God.
And he had this to say about the President of the United States.
If you have heard him recite the pledge, he skips under God. Never says those two words, under God.
So the president, according to the Cruz Sr., never says the word under God in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, in his alternative universe, that might be true, but in the fact-based world we all live in, where there is such a thing as videotape, for example, we know it's not true. Now listen here to a 180 difference between nonsense and reality.
We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have been and always will be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So that recalls Groucho Marx. You're going to believe me or your lion eyes, Wayne? I mean, I'm believing my lion eyes here because I just heard the president say under God 3 times. I'm sure it's habitual with him. I don't know why does the other guy say stuff that's so demonstrably untrue? Are there people out there that don't care about truth and they just want to hear the gospel of the Cruz family? Why do they want to be lied to? Because this is one of those rare cases, I'll use the word lie, when it just isn't true and objectively isn't true. It's not about opinion or analysis or point of view or context. It's not true. He says under God.
Yeah, well, as the Romans said to Christ, what is truth? Truth is, in this case, a much larger thing. Rafael Cruz, despite the obvious errors here, the obvious lie or fact that it's not true that Obama doesn't use the term under God, Rafael Cruz is speaking to, and Ted Cruz is speaking to a larger area, a larger message, a larger narrative. He's speaking to grievance and anxiety. He's speaking to people who not only think they have lost or that the world is not, that the country is not holding its center, but who feel that they've been betrayed by their government, betrayed by a lot of other people. And so when he speaks in these ways, these are ways that resonate. Chris, if I went today, and I know David has done this, back to Iowa, northern Florida, and parts of South Carolina, and asked Christians, even if they just saw that clip, whether Obama has never used the words under God when he recites the pledge, they will say absolutely. They will believe it because it's part of a larger sense, a fear to which the person who presents absolutes, and that's Ted Cruz, the person who brings this in a theological and, frankly, a Tea Party populist sense, and that's Rafael Cruz, is telling the truth.
I just want to say that this reminds me of what we always believed about the Marxists. I mean, the real Moscow-based communists who did it for a living, that they would say anything that they believed would advance their cause. Truth to them was whatever advances the cause. It sounds so much like the parallel to that, Wayne.
You know what's interesting, too, and Wayne sort of got at this, is that Rafael Cruz really represents the full synthesis of the religious right, which we talked about a lot during the 80s, and the Tea Party right, which we've talked about the last few years. There's a tremendous overlap there, and they both are factions based on grievance, feeling they're not in the mainstream. And these people are, he gives these speeches, he goes to these mega churches and talks about this stuff, and they say, yes, your son will deliver us. They mean it politically and spiritually.
By the way, any connection between Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, and this crowd is purely coincidental. Anyway, thank you, David Corn, and thank you, Wayne Slater, down in Texas.